What strikes us in today's gospel is the depth of communication between Jesus and the Samaritan woman. In the shorter version of the gospel, it wasn't included that it turned out that Jesus knows everything about the Samaritan woman, how many husbands he had, and with whom he is living now is not her husband. By the end of their conversation, she learns and knows that Jesus is the Messiah. What is fascinating is the depth of their conversation, the experience, how transparent her whole life became in the presence of Jesus. By the end of their conversation, she could clearly see and name the shadows, all her shadows, all the failures of her love. This conversation is a model for us all. Being an adult, it means that we need the same conversation, the same depth of conversation. We need being x-rayed by the love and compassion of our Lord. This type of conversation requires honesty. This requires a hard work. In order to have this conversation, when we feel fully at peace at what we had done in our lives, it requires a full conversion. Why? Because we and people in general, we live a life which prevents similar healing conversations. We have lost this prime time with Jesus. He is the true source and the true friend of our soul. And it easily turns out that we, even Christians, spend the least amount of time with Him. I'd like to quote again few data from Norina Hertz's book Lonely Sanctuary. An average person checks 221 times their phone each day. In an average person's life who has a smartphone, this adds up to 3 hours and 15 minutes of average daily use. 3 hours and 15 minutes. Almost 1,200 hours per year. 1,200 hours. We are billionaires of prime time, but we are gambling it away. Around half of the teens are now online almost constantly. A third of adults check their phones within 5 minutes of waking up. Many of us do so if we wake up in the middle of the night too. So, where are the morning prayers of the good old days when our first thought were literally about God, to mark our day with Him? The title of Norina Hertz's book is The Lonely Sanctuary. And I would like to add something to her question. She asks, how central are these devices to the loneliness crisis of the 21st century? We could add, reframing the question, how central is this waste of prime time to our loneliness, to the dissatisfaction of our soul? How central is this waste of time and days and years spent without encountering God? And everyone, every adult is waiting for that moment of liberation which the Samaritan woman experienced. So, how can we live without that life-changing conversation which we read in the Gospel? Our world is glued to our devices. Equally important, we are glued to the ready-made content, the bad news, the desires, what companies and politicians carefully manufacture for us and implant in us. It is not Bill Gates' microchip which is injected into people with the COVID vaccine. No. It is false desires. These devices, as Norina Hertz puts it, like a pair of glasses on our face, whose presence we no longer notice, have become part of us. It is not a conspiracy theory, it is a matter of fact. This state of permanent connection with, if we are honest ourselves, with garbage time, contributes to people's loneliness. Every moment in which we are on our phones, scrolling, watching videos, reading tweets, commenting on pictures, we are not present with those around us. Researchers show that strangers smile significantly less at each other when they have their smartphones with them. We behave differently when our smartphone is with us in our pockets. They estrange us from people we already know, including those we love and care for. For all the time we are on our devices is also time we are not present with our friends, our colleagues, and our children. And this is genuinely true about prayer. Naturally, there is a flow of time in each of us. This is the desire to think of others. This is the desire to pray for others. That's its next level, when we're not only thinking about our beloved ones, how they are, what they are doing, but when we are praying for them. And today, as a culture, we are losing the ability to pray, because prayer is the most special form of attention. Prayer, among many things, is about our ability to feel empathy when it is needed, on the spot. The distracting nature of smartphones, smart tellies, significantly erode this crucial skill. which help us understand and connect with each other. This is because they fragment our attention, creating a splintered self. And just as a last example, and this homily is not about smartphones, it's about this other type of time, prayer. They examined what happened when a smartphone was placed between couples who are in love. When a smartphone was placed between a couple on a table, or even just held in one of their hands, couples felt less close to each other, less empathic. And our life is sharing a table with God. Whatever smart device is in our hands, it creates a distance. These couples felt less close to each other, less empathic. Strikingly, the more intimate the relationship was between them, the more painful the contrast was that they experienced and were able to express. When devices had the upper hand, the less each person felt understood, supported, and valued. And this is particularly worrying, concludes the author, because empathy, like democracy, needs to be practiced. Empathy needs to be practiced. Empathy, this special form of prayer, needs to be practiced. Prayer needs to be practiced. That is why, if we want to meet Jesus, in particular with our unfinished businesses, if we want to meet Jesus in a life-changing way, we need to silence unnecessary noises. A big bulk of that 1,200 hours which we waste in a year. So you see that Christian worship is the only place when the human soul, when people go offline. That is why we have to use this experience wisely, this organic time, this prime time with God and each other. And we really have to make an effort to take this time with us, to extend it into our lives. And we must dramatically alter the proportions, what is dedicated to God daily and what is dedicated to meaningless things. Let us live with all the support our church offers. The morning and evening prayers, the spiritual exercises in Lent, the Angelus prayer, the online prayer which Daniel invited us, reading the Bible, creating a time each day when we can have a similarly honest and full conversation which we saw in today's Gospel.